Okay. Okay. All right. So I am going to ask, as you are arriving, that you please write your name in the chat to let me know you have arrived. I see we have 4 people so far. All right. Hi, Monica. And hello, Mike. We are going to get started at about 6 o'clock. So we'll give it a little bit of time for more people to arrive. I'm hoping that this won't take too long. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I do appreciate you taking part of your Friday night to be with us. So we will get started on time, and we will try to finish by 7, I'm hoping. I hope at the latest, depending on how many questions people have. All right. Good evening. I'm okay. All right. Glad we could have you with us. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes. We did say 6 o'clock, so I'm going to hold to that. So we're going to start at 6 o'clock, so just a couple more minutes. All right, and Luis, I did see your email. I just wanted to let you know that I did see your email, so I know that you're here. I know you don't have the ability to chat, but that's okay. If you do have any questions, I have that email open on my phone, so you can go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be able to take a look at that as well as I'm going through the Q&A piece with all of you. And just as a reminder, that's staff@MCAEL.org. That's the email address that you can reach me at, and that is one way to reach me if you're not able to use the chat, which, Louise, I know you said you're not able to do. So, all right. Well, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to say is that there is a very small lag, which means there's just a little bit of time between the time that I say something and the time that you hear it. Typically on YouTube Live, that's just in case someone says something that they shouldn't and they want to, make sure no one hears it. I don't think that's going to happen this time. But if anything like that, if you do notice that you can't hear me at any point or if it's too quiet, feel free to send me a message in the chat, or like I said, you can also send me an email to staff@MCAEL.org. Okay, quick introductions. My name is, hi Alex. I see that you're here too. Perfect. Okay, so my name is Margaret. I am the Intake and Assessment Specialist for the Adult ESOL and Literacy Grant Program with Montgomery College. And then I'm also the Observation Coordinator here at MCAEL. We did this about 2 years ago in 2016. It was a little bit more than 2 years ago because last time we did it in the summer. This time we're doing it in the fall and the winter. So we did do this in 2016. I think that we got a lot of really good information out of it. We got a lot of really good data. So there are going to be a few changes this time, but I think we're going to, go similar to what we did last time. So that's our plan right now. Hi, Christine. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First, just by talking a little bit about what we're going to be doing throughout the course of this webinar. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the goals of the program, why it is that we want to do an observation project. We're also going to take some time then to talk about the responsibilities of the observer, of the teacher, and of the administrator. Those are 3 pieces that kind of fit together in this program, and we want to make sure that each of you is aware of what your role would be if you participate. We're also going to talk then about the observation form. We might make a few comments about the data analysis. I don't know if they sent out the report last time that 2 years ago, there was a report put together. I know that some people have it. I don't know that everyone has access to it, but we can talk a little bit about what's done with the data that we collect. And then, I'll give you some final remarks, and we'll have a time for a Q&A. If any of you have questions, you can feel free to write them in the chat, or like I said, If you are not able to use the chat, you can also send me an email. I have that open on my phone, and I'm refreshing it every once in a while to make sure I don't miss any emails that way. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the goals of the program. So the main goal that we want for this program is for there to be a way to acquire data to guide professional development. This is the same goal that we had last time. We want to know what topics our instructors would benefit from and what our instructors are already doing well. So if any of you have ever been to a MCAEL professional development workshop or anything like that, you know that a lot of work goes into it. We want to make sure that the work that's being put in is the work that needs to be put in. So this is a way to make sure that it's very targeted to what the needs of the instructors in our programs actually are. We're also looking a little bit at what areas our instructors could benefit from coaching. So this is something, it's still kind of new, it's still kind of being worked through, but this is another area that we want to know about. Another goal of the observation program, and in my experience, I think probably the biggest benefit, is that it provides an opportunity for collaboration between the observers, who are all experienced educators, and the instructors. So those of you who participated last year, you may remember that after each observation, there was some time for the observer to go over the results with the instructor, provide any feedback that they may want to provide, talk about some ideas that maybe could have worked a little bit better. There's a really big opportunity there for collaboration between these two individuals. So finally, our last goal, and this is one that's very specific to the observers, is that we want to be a fly on the wall, meaning we do not want to interfere in the class in any way. We want it to be as close as possible to what the class would be like if we were not in the room. So this is going to give us a low effective filter for both the instructor and the students, which means that everyone is feeling comfortable and they're doing what they would do naturally. They're not feeling like they're being critiqued. They're not feeling like that they have to perform especially well. And this is going to help us collect some authentic data. And that's that last thing that looks like it's a little cut off on the YouTube screen. But yeah, that is going to give us some authentic data to work with. We don't want data that's skewed. So if we go into a classroom and we're not a fly on the wall, if we're a little bit more engaged, or if we're putting unnecessary pressure on the instructors, then the data that we're gaining is not accurate. It's accurate only to the teacher's class when there is someone in the classroom interfering and observing. That is not going to give us actual information that could help us develop our professional development. So we want to make sure that it's authentic as possible. I'm going to go ahead and talk now a little bit about the responsibilities of the observer. You can see we have our little fly on the wall over here. That's what we want to be. So the main thing that I really want to emphasize as we're going through this, and this was the same thing that we emphasized in 2016, is that we want our observers to be supportive and positive. You are not there to critique the teacher. You're not there to find what the teacher's doing wrong. That's not what we want the attitude to be whatsoever. There's going to be some collaboration as appropriate. Obviously, in the middle of the classroom, do not stand up and say, you might want to try doing this instead. That's not what we want. But we do want our observers to be thorough when they're completing the observation form so that we can get as much data as possible. And the observation form is a little lengthy. It's 2 pages. It does have a lot of details. We try to break it up to make it as intuitive as possible. It just kind of follows the flow of what we would, hope to see in a lesson. Not every lesson is going to have all the pieces, and we can talk about that. So the observer, we really want them to provide some details and examples on the observation form. I have to go through all of this data, and I am not going to be physically in each of these classes. Hi, Chow Chow. Nice. I'm glad you could join us. So we have to collect data from these classes that I can then use when I create my report at the end of the project. So we need data that has a lot of examples and a lot of details. Because if you say, yes, the teacher did a warm-up activity, that could mean the teacher wrote today's date on the board and then proceeded with a different topic, or, there's a lot of different things that could mean. So we actually want to know what type of warm-up activity are our teachers using. Is this something that they need to work on, or is this something that they all, pretty much have down? So the more details that we can get from our observers, the better. This is also really good because it means there's going to be a lot for the instructor and the observer to discuss after the class. They're going to take time to actually go in depth in the lesson and say, hey, it worked really, really well when you did this activity. Did you notice that this student in particular was really excited about it? But I noticed that some of the students got lost when we did this activity. Maybe that's why. And maybe this is why. So, there's a lot of collaboration that can happen, but the more details you have on that report, the better that collaboration is going to be as well. Once all of the observations are complete, we're asking that you turn in your observation form to staff@mcael.org. This is the email address that we'll be using. And then please don't be judgmental. This is not a problem that we've ever had in the past. All of our observers have been very, very supportive and very engaged and kind. But, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to put it out there. Don't be judgmental. Our role is to help, all right? We are here as a support role. So the next thing we're going to go over, and I will also say as we're going back to this, once you are selected as an observer, and if anyone here is interested in being an observer, please let me know. Once you're selected as an observer, there's going to be a separate training that we go through, and it's going to be the same deal. It's going to be on YouTube Live. You can do it from your house. I really, we're trying to make this as convenient as possible for everyone. It's a big county. People are kind of spread out with different schedules. So, but I am going to have a separate meeting for our observers so that we can actually go through their responsibilities in depth, and I can answer any questions that they might have. Okay, so let's go ahead now and talk about the responsibilities of the instructor. So instructors, when you have an observer come to your class, welcome them, all right? Don't be mean to them. You're going to want to prepare the students. I say that no one was ever mean to any of our observers. It's just, things that you say. Okay, so we're going to prepare the students for the observer's presence. We want to be a fly on the wall, but the reality is that we are a human being in a classroom. And our students, who are other human beings, are going to notice that there is a new person in class. So please take some time, if possible, before the class or maybe even in the beginning of the class, to let the students know, hey, this person is going to come into the class, going to sit quietly and just take some notes. You don't have to worry about talking to them. You don't have to worry about them looking at your work, or just things to make sure that they're aware this is not anyone who's there to observe them, and just so they're aware of why the person is there. Teachers, give class as you normally would. Pretend we're not there. The class, we ask that you do end the class 15 minutes early when you have an observer in the room, so that you have that time to discuss the results with the observer. So this is just time for that collaboration. I will say, sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes 25 minutes. 15 minutes, I think, is a good amount of time, but I definitely, last time we did this, there were definitely some teachers who had more questions, or there were classes where I just had a lot of, a lot of things that I was excited about that I wanted to talk to the teacher about. So take time out of your class just at the final 15 minutes to talk with the observer. And remember that these observations are meant to help. Please don't be nervous. Don't feel like you're being put on the spot. We're doing this for you. We're not doing this for us. We're not doing this for MCAEL. We're not doing this for your administrators. We're doing this for you, so that we can better serve you. So don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. And there is an opportunity for you to review the observer. You can send an observer review form to staff@mcael.org, and we will make sure that that's available to you as we are planning the observation. So if you are an instructor who is selected for an observation, then you'll be able to send that form in about your observer after the observation has taken place. Okay, So, some responsibilities of the administrator. And this is actual footage of me during intake. I use this in my intake presentations at Montgomery College too. All right. So, we are going to have you coordinate the observation with me. And I'm really going to emphasize this. This is where I think some of the biggest challenges were when we did this in 2016. We need to make sure that you are collaborating with me and giving me all the information that I need as early as possible. This means I need to know when your classes are, which location, because some of you have multiple locations, so which location you're having class. I need to know which instructor is going to be observed, and if possible, a classroom number or something like that. Not every program has an administrator there at all times. This was one of the things that we ran into last time. So if you're not going to be there when the observer comes, just some instructions for the observer on how to find the classroom, because a lot of times if we're meeting in like big buildings like a school or a church or something like that, there's multiple entrances. We don't always know where to go. So that'll just make things run really, really smooth from the beginning if you can just get me that information. And then the other thing that I want to make sure that all of you are aware of is that I am going to be checking this email basically every day. If you don't hear back from me by the end of the day, it probably means that I haven't received your email. Something didn't go through. So just, don't be afraid to shoot me a second email in a day, just in case something did go wrong with those emails. I want to make sure that I'm getting all of the emails, and I want to make sure that you're getting my emails as well, so we can keep that communication as smooth as possible. We do ask that you let us know which classes and instructors are going to be observed, but here's the piece of this is that I ask administrators to be as flexible as possible. As I'm, getting information about when your classes are, I'm also going to be getting information about when my observers are available. This is no one's full-time job, so we have to work around the availability of our observers as well. So just, keep that in mind. So if you have 3 different classes, just be aware that we may want to observe more than one of them in the same day. We may want to observe one week, one another week. Just keep that in mind. Make sure that the observer has access and directions to the assigned class. I kind of went through that already, but I'm just going to emphasize it again. There were a couple of sites last year where it was a little bit hard for the observers to find the class. So we want to make sure that that's really, really, communication is really clear. Do not use the observations as a means of evaluating teacher performance, okay? Again, if you want to do your own observations, by all means do your own observations, but we're not going to be using these results for that purpose. And but you can use the observation results to guide and support instructors. On this note, this is if the instructors choose to share their results with the administrators. If you have an instructor, because we are not sending these results to the administrators, the people who have these results are the instructors. Programs you can decide to do with this whatever you want. I just want to make sure you're aware that you should not be using this to evaluate your instructors in any way. That's not the purpose. All right. So let's take some time now. We're going to go over the observation form, and we're just going to go over it piece by piece. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make sure. Oh, I zoomed in too much. Okay. To make sure that you can see all of it. Let's see. Let me zoom in once more. And once more. There we go. I think that's good. Okay. So as we're going through, there are a few different pieces. So we have the classroom location, teacher name, teacher email address, class level, date of observation, observer name, observer email address, and the number of students registered. Obviously, some of this information you're not going to know when you walk into the classroom. You might have to ask the teacher how many students are registered. You may have to collect a little bit more information as you're going through, but oops, this should be date of the observation, not date and. Date of the observation. There we go, editing as we go. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna want to know about is whether or not the lesson started on time. If it did not start on time, that's not, there's, in my experience, last time that we went through this, if a lesson didn't start on time, there was usually a really good reason for it. So feel free to put the reason too if the answer is no. Were the students on time? Again, in my experience, both as a teacher and as an administrator and having done these observations before, if you have 100% of your students in class on time, please share your secret with the rest of us, because that is a really, really difficult goal to achieve. But, again, just give me a general, we'll get a general estimate. 50% of the students were here on time, 75%, something like that. How many students attended the class? So this is how many in total. This is were the students on time, and then how many students actually attended the class. And this is just to give us an idea of how many students were in the class versus how many registered, things like that. And then what were the objectives and were they displayed? So this might not be something that you as the observer know. Sometimes teachers will display the objectives in the beginning of the class. Great, perfect. Other times they might not. And then you might want to actually ask the teacher at the end what their objectives were if you weren't able to ascertain that from actually observing the class. The next piece of this is the warm-up activity. So describe the warm-up activity as applicable. Not everyone is going to have a warm-up activity. We hope that we see some pretty cool warm-up activities as we go through, but this is just something to keep in mind. Be aware of how the teacher is presenting the information and what techniques were used. This does not have to be, you don't have to use exact terminology, but you just want to, make sure you're explaining, was the teacher using a whiteboard? Did the teacher make use of a projector? Did the teacher have flip charts? Did the teacher bring in images? Did the teacher use their phone? There's a whole bunch of ways that information can be presented. We just want to know how that was happening. And just a really quick, were the directions clear? Explain. A lot of times the answer is just, yes, they were clear. Okay, great, that's perfect. But if they weren't clear, that's where you would maybe want to explain a little bit more. Were students provided with ample time to practice? What types of practices were employed? Again, just keep in mind what activities the teacher is using and just make note of them so that we know. And then the application activity. Not every lesson has an application activity. It is impossible for every single lesson to have an application activity. Because that can be a little bit lengthy and not every class has a chance to do that. But application activities are important, so we do hope that at least some of the classes are using application activities. And it might be worth going over with the teacher too, if they don't use an application activity, just, going over, hey, I noticed you didn't have an application activity. Maybe here's something you could do if you continue this topic next time. You could build up to doing this project, or you could build up to doing this, or, just different ideas that you might have. The next question is about feedback. We just want to know general positive reinforcement. Is it, are you encouraging your students a lot? Are you giving a lot of praise when they do things right? How are you approaching it when students make errors? That's another big piece of this. Are you scolding them? Hopefully not, but, just things to be aware of. So that's what we are looking for there, is specifically praise and correction types of feedback. And then were all 4 language skills integrated, and how? This is speaking and writing, as well as listening and reading, okay? We want to make sure that all 4 language skills are in the classes. If they're not, that would be a good opportunity. If you're saying, you know what, we didn't have a whole lot of writing practice in this activity or in this lesson, here's some ways that maybe you could have integrated it. Here's some ways you can integrate it next time, things like that. And then the materials that are used in class. So sometimes it's a textbook, sometimes you have a CD, sometimes you have papers the teacher brings in, sometimes you have realia. It could be a lot of different things, but we just ask that you put down the materials that were used in class. This is a little bit of a change from the way we phrased it last year, but all right. So from here, we want to know about the grouping throughout the class. So the grouping throughout the class, this could mean that, for example, during the presentation piece of the lesson, the whole group was together. And then in practice, they worked in small groups or they did individual work. Just let us know how the groupings changed and if you felt they were balanced and appropriate. How much time did the teacher spend talking? This is always hard. They say 80-20. I mean, it's the ideal, right? It's what we all strive for, but I don't think that many of us are necessarily going to get there all the time, and that's okay. But if you see, for example, the teacher did most of the talking, you might want to, make a note of that. So again, you can just put estimations of percentages here, or you can just say it was about half and half, however makes sense to you, as long as we're getting information about how much teacher talk time there actually is, because remember, ultimately, we want to see that going down. And finally finally on that page, was the teacher warm and friendly, and did the students seem comfortable? For me, at least, this is huge. If the students are comfortable in the class, it's going to be a lot easier for them to practice the language that they're learning than if they don't feel comfortable. So that's a big point, and I do ask that you provide some information about that as well. So moving on to that next page then, almost done. So that next page, describe the environment of the classroom and the seating arrangement of the students. You don't have to give a ton of information about this. This is something that's just more if you have all of the students facing away from the whiteboard or something like that, that you'll want to make sure that you're mentioning. Or if you see that students are kind of grouped together and talk by language, that's another thing. Like you notice, okay, I see all the students who speak Amharic are sitting together, all the students who speak Spanish are sitting together, and they're that might be something where you might want to mix them up a little bit so they have to use their English more. Just things like that. And just make a note if the students were engaged and interested. If they weren't, that might be something that the teacher would want to look at later. So the next one is, was there evidence of healthy classroom community? And provide examples if you can. Healthy classroom community could mean a lot of different things, but really we want to see that the students actually get to talk to each other and get to interact with each other and use the English that they're learning. And also we know that a strong classroom community is going to help retention a lot. So that's just something else to keep in mind. And then the last question in that section is describe the evaluation component of the lesson as applicable. Remember that evaluation doesn't have to be formal. Evaluation can be something as simple as walking around and checking the students' work. It could be listening to students as they're using the language in a conversation. But some sort of component there that's actually making sure students are getting what they're being taught. So the last portion then is something that that the observers will need to get directly from the teacher. That's the level of experience that the teacher has. So for example, if the teacher has a master's degree, you might want to put it there. If the teacher is just, a volunteer, not much experience in ESOL, but, doing this to help the students, then that's another thing to put in there. The educational background of the teacher, again, is this what the teacher studied? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. One of the best teachers I've ever observed didn't actually have an educational background in ESOL, and that sometimes is how things work out. But yeah, just make a note of that. We want to know how many trainings the teacher has attended. We're curious to see how many MCAEL trainings our teachers are going to and how that's, how it's helping, if it's helping. I think it's helping. All right. And finally, describe any other professional development that the teacher has done. So for example, if they've gone to the TESOL conventions or the WA TESOL conventions or the Maryland TESOL conventions or any of the many, many professional development opportunities that they have in this area, and they want to talk about that, great, we want to hear about that as well. And then at the bottom of the form, there's an opportunity for you to provide additional notes. I always try to encourage this section to be as positive as possible. So make notes when something really great happened. So when you saw that a student had an aha moment, put that down. When you see that two students are really, really engaged in their role play and they're using the language in really creative ways and this was a great activity, put that down. So, you can put down specific notes for other things as well, but we want to end these observations on a positive note. And again, beyond that, it's good to know what teachers are doing really well. So that's something just to keep in mind there as well. All right. And then let's go back to our observation form, or our PowerPoint. So some final remarks. Many of our instructors have limited or no training in TESOL. Some of them do, but not all of them. So what I want you to keep in mind here is that all of them have their hearts in the right place. So it's not like we all went into adult education to make a bunch of money, and a lot of our teachers are volunteers. Just keep that in mind. We're here to help our students. We have a shared goal. So as we're going into the classroom, as the observers are going into the classroom and observing the instructors, programs, I just want you to know that we all have the same goal of making sure that our students are getting the best education they possibly can in our classrooms. And we're all just working together to make sure that we know that this is the end result, that our students are getting the best out of our classrooms, and that if there's places where we can improve, we're all working together to make sure that those improvements happen. We really want to know what our instructors are doing right. I know I emphasize this over and over. I'm going to keep emphasizing it over and over. I tend to be a fairly positive person. I want to know what our students or what our instructors are doing well. And these observations are meant to be constructive. And I think that 2 years ago we found that they really were, and we had some pretty good comments as we went through it then. So I'm hoping that we'll have more this year. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Okay, good. Half an hour. I didn't want to take up too much of your night with this. So I want to leave some time now for any questions that you might have. You can go ahead and put those questions in the chat box, and I will respond. Please just make a note. There is that little bit of a lag. So what I'm saying now, you're hearing in about maybe 10 to 15 seconds. So once you put your question in the chat, it might take me a little bit of time to answer. That's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just because I have to wait. You have to wait to hear me. So I'll say it, and then you have to wait to hear me. So go ahead and put in any questions that you might have. Okay, so good question, Alex. These observations are going to be taking place starting probably in January. So there are going to be, that's I think when most of the classes are going to be starting up again in that winter semester after the holidays. So yeah, in the beginning of the year, and they're going to go for a few months. So we're going to try to spread them out a bit more than we did last time that we did this. So that there's more flexibility for the observers and for the programs, and also so we have flexibility keeping in mind, there's snow. And they say that this winter is going to be a bit of a snowy one or a cold one. So yeah, they're going to go several months, but it's going to be in that time frame. So during the month of November and December, I'm going to be getting all of the information I need to schedule these observations, going to be getting people to sign up to be observers, going to get programs to sign up to be participants, and then all of these observations will actually start taking place in the new year. Do we have any other questions? Okay, question in my email. Check that out now. Was this? All right, so Christine, I'm not seeing an email in this staff@mccael.org email. Let me go ahead and see if they sent it to one of my other email addresses. So Mike, are there minimum qualifications to be an observer? We do ask that observers be individuals who have a fair amount of experience in ESOL. So someone who has been an ESOL teacher for a number of years, who has, a degree in ESOL. In terms of minimum qualifications, I won't say we want someone who has a master's degree necessarily. It's really focused more on the amount of experience that they have. But yeah, we do ask that you have a fair amount of experience actually teaching ESL classes. Okay, Luis is asking. Okay, so we had a question if you are an instructor and you're interested in being observed, should you tell your administrator? Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to tell your administrator. These observations are not going to be scheduled unless your program administrator actually wants to participate. But yeah, you absolutely should talk to your administrator and let them know that you'd like to be observed. Thank you for asking that. That's a really good question. All right. Are there any other questions? Is there a maximum for observers in each session? So is there a maximum for observers in each session? I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Do you mean to ask if there's a maximum number of observers? I'm going to answer the two ways that I can interpret that. If there's a maximum number for observers, yes, we don't want too many because there's not going to be enough work to go around if we have too many. That said, that certainly has not been a problem we've had in the past. So if anyone is interested in being an observer, feel free to reach out. And then if there's a maximum number of observations that an observer can complete, again, the answer is no. We want to make sure that, when I create the schedule, I'm going to be as fair as possible and make sure that I'm giving as many observations to each observer as I can based on their availability, and make sure that it's distributed as fairly as possible. But there's no maximum number of observations that an observer can complete. I hope I answered your question. If you meant something else, feel free to let me know in the chat. And Vince, is it realistic to say you can effectively evaluate all 4 skills? Some lessons lend themselves to specific skills over others. So yeah, I understand what you mean. So for example, if you're giving a lesson about asking for directions, you may find that it's a little bit heavier on speaking and listening, or on reading maps and speaking and listening, than it would be on writing. And that's fair. That's fair. I definitely don't think that each of them is going to have the same weight individually. However, we would try to see at least some writing in each lesson. And again, it's going to be based on the theme, the way that these are weighted. So if you are giving a theme and you have some writing but not a lot, and you have a lot more listening and speaking, that's normal. Not everything is going to be perfectly balanced all the time. But we do want to try to make sure, that students are getting practice with all 4 of those areas. So, all right, that's a good question, Vince. Absolutely, and you raise a good point. Anyone else? Okay. If we don't have any other questions, then I am going to ask that if you come up with anything later, or if you're watching this after this has taken place, this is going to be available on the MCAEL YouTube channel, so you can watch it. If you have any questions about this that come up later, please feel free to reach out. Again, I'm going to be checking that email every day, and I try to be pretty good about responding to emails. So feel free to reach out and let me know, and I will get back to you. And again, if you don't hear back from me by the end of the day, it's probably because I didn't get your email. So please resend it. We want to make sure that that isn't becoming an issue in terms of communication. We want to make sure all of our questions are being answered as quickly as possible. So next steps from this point: if you are interested in participating in the observation program, please go ahead and just send an email to staff@mcael.org. We made it a really easy email this time for you to remember. staff@mcael.org. Just go ahead and send me an email, and we can go ahead and get started with getting these observations scheduled. I'm pretty excited. All right, and if you have no more questions, then I am going to say that we have dismissed, and thank you again for giving us a chunk of your Friday evening. I know you all probably have exciting plans, so thank you all.